Hi, welcome, welcome, welcome.
Thank you.
Um, it's not too often that I meet someone and invite them into my childhood bedroom, but here we are.
I'm
Welcome.
honored. Thank you. Thank you.
I'm so glad to have you here. Yeah, so we're really pumped to chat with you. We've been talking about journalism in Canada, and working with you guys at Lion Publishers as well as the Google News Initiative. So I thought we could we've had a couple discussions on our grid, but I wanted to start where I am the most concerned about this, and I feel like maybe you can lend some insight. First of all, Anika, let me introduce you. Um, you oversee Lion Publishers' day-to-day operations, including programming, communications, and membership. You helped launch the first startup bootcamp in 2020, which we'll get to in a little bit to talk about what that is, and has overseen a lot of other works through the GNI Startups Playbook. And you've previously launched a local news initiative startup with Whereby US, and has worked in product and engagement rules for the Seattle Times Education Club and Chalkbeat, things that don't make a whole lot of sense to me off the jump, but I feel like you're going to tell us about it and it's going to be pretty interesting. So to start, I want to get to the thing I'm the most interested about, which is I read that Canada is the 21st most concentrated media in the world. And then when I looked into it a little bit further, it was like basically 5 major corporations own like 89% of all of Canada's media. And like America is less concentrated. So they're like 30 on that list. We're 21, which like Canadians spend so much of our lives being like we're better than Americans. So it boggles my mind that
I'm I'm very familiar with that sentiment. My mom actually grew up in Canada, so I'm technically one of those dual citizens.
mm,
I was born and raised in the US, so I'm most familiar with the US media ecosystem, but that's right. And, actually, the US is similarly becoming more and more consolidated as more hedge funds buy up or private equity firms buy up legacy newspapers. And
mm,
that's been a trend happening for, at least the last 10 to 15 years. And the independent news movement is partially a direct response to that, really trying to encourage local ownership where the news is being created, as opposed to, someone in New York managing the financials and operations of, a publication here in Seattle, where I live, for example.
right. So what is independent media really? Like what's the value in it? What is it? Yeah, let's start there maybe.
Yeah, so the definition of independent news is changing as the ecosystem changes. And so at Lion Publishers, we're a membership association and, we try to be responsive to that definition. But at its core, what it means to be independent is you have independent finances and operations and work that you're producing of any sort of major corporation, any sort of religious institution, academic institution. Basically, like what your budget is and you're managing it at the end of the day. Like you're the one moving around the
Mm-hmm.
numbers in the spreadsheet. And that sounds, a little boring and maybe in the weeds, but it's really important, as I'm sure starting the OnCanada Project, just how important it is to have that level of control and understanding of what your business is and be able to make those decisions that are going to impact the
Right.
health of your business. So at its core, that's what it means to be independent, an independent news business. And then, of course, at Lion, our focus is primarily supporting publishers reporting on local news. And, local news has been in a pretty tough place for the last at least couple decades in the US. We've seen a lot of
Mm-hmm.
newspapers close, a lot of local news sources just disappearing altogether. And so it's just been incredibly important for other people to step in and create new news sources so that these communities have a place to get their local news.
Okay, so um, we've talked a little bit about what independent media is, and we talked a little bit about why it's important. But what's like, I feel like there's like this unspoken thing around like what happens when it's a couple major organizations running something. Can you speak a little bit more to that? Because like I imagine it limits the scope of what can be what is talked about, and then you report up to like a board or a group of shareholders, which might limit what you're saying, and which ultimately like might remove certain narratives from, depending on people's interests and places that they're involved in, might remove that from being like part of a focus or part of a area. Is that something that also happens with like traditional media that's sort of owned by who knows who?
Yeah, so I can't speak to any particular, media in Canada or in the US, but I can say, generally speaking, there's two major concerns there. One, the governance itself, right? So if
Right.
you have a large corporation or one very, very large company controlling a bunch of different media properties, particularly, in different geographic locations, that can impact the governance that's happening there. So you might have decisions from the top that are good for one market, but not necessarily three other markets, right? Just as an example. So when you're trying to work at that kind of scale, not, the what's in the best interest for each publication isn't always necessarily going to be considered. So that's like the governance, kind of operations piece of it. And then I think just the other side of it, which we all know from, all the recent public conversations about diversity, the importance of racial and ethnic diversity in particular in media, is just the lack of diverse perspectives. The fewer people you have at the top, controlling media and making decisions about the media landscape across the country, the fewer diverse perspectives you get. And so that's actually one reason I'm so passionate about independent media, is because it ensures that more people from different backgrounds and experiences can be part of the conversation and creating news, which is just it's just what we need. We need so much more of that.
And I guess one of the options to diversifying this is to get more people writing and get more people starting their own little initiatives, which is why this Google News or this GNI Bootcamp startup thing is like really cool, is because it puts sort of the power back in the person and sets them up with the tools versus being like, here's the fish. It's like, here's how you can fish and how you can make it a lucrative business. Can you maybe talk a little bit about, first of all, like what makes a journalist? Because I think one of the questions we had around the post that we put up was like, this is a cool like Google News Initiative Bootcamp thing, but I didn't go to school for journalism, so why should I engage with this?
Yeah, the really cool thing I think about independent media is that it does democratize the ability to create news. And so we are not at all tied to people, coming through with a journalism degree or even having specific newsroom experience. At the end of the day, being a journalist is about clearly communicating information in a way that is compelling, as well as delightful, as well as useful. And, I would argue much of what we see on social media, whether it's, traditional influencers or, Facebook groups to a certain extent, are examples of journalism at the end of the day. It's a clear communication of information, and in a lot of cases is reaching folks that have often been overlooked by traditional media or legacy media in some sort of way. So we are really open to folks from any background coming into this program. That being said, there are obviously central tenets of journalism that we really value. So, a commitment to not perpetuating misinformation is a really important one. We've seen all the negative ramifications that can happen as a result of that. Also, just having, ethical policies and, high standards for what gets published when. It's a lot of responsibility to be a journalist, when you are the one put in charge of communicating information clearly and accurately. It's a lot of responsibility. So we make sure the folks in the boot camp know that as well, because we want to empower the next generation of media owners who, again, take that responsibility seriously.
That's really awesome. So I love this idea of like, if you have a story to share, or if you think that there's an overlooked community whose stories you think should be shared, or experience that should be shared, you could venture into the space of independent media. And if you're not all you're really looking for is someone who like is passionate to do that, not necessarily needing all the tools and skills or stuff to come with it. Just like, I want to do this. I care about this. I see that there's a need for this in the ecosystem. I'm going to take a step forward and like engage in this by attending the GNI Startups Bootcamp or applying and hopefully getting in.
Yes. Yeah.
And what's really cool about this bootcamp is that it's super accessible because it's free.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Yeah.
It is completely free. Yeah, it's kind of amazing. I mean, when, you know, I'd say like at least a couple years into my journalism career, I knew I wanted to start something. And I got some experience under my belt. I worked at a couple, you know, different publications. And then this opportunity came up where I had the ability to start something. And, you know, fortunately, we were able to team up with Whereby Us. You mentioned earlier, they had a network of sites and we launched their second site in Seattle. And it was a great experience and I learned a ton. But it wasn't necessarily mine. And again, this is what comes, you know, it comes back to independent media. I still had bosses and they were paying my salary. And so at the end of the day, when I go back and look at, you know, how could I have gotten started? Where would I have even, you know, begun to get the kind of coaching or tools or just network to understand how to build something from scratch? It didn't exist. I didn't know where to go. So that's one reason this program is so near and dear to my heart, is like, I'm creating the thing that I wish I had like 5-6 years ago. And we hear that from the folks that have come through the first cohort last year. The second cohort's currently in progress in the States. And we hear that all the time from them. Like, I had no idea where to start. And this has given me those stepping stones and that important foundation to start building on.
Oh, that's really awesome. And maybe you could take us through a little bit more about what this bootcamp looks like. So like the process is, there's an application link. We have it on our story right now. It's also in our link in bio, and it's due November 14th. But say I apply and I get it, or someone applies and gets in. What's the vibe? What's going on here? What am I in for?
Yes. So first of all, it's intense. We're not going to lie about that. It's only 8 weeks and there's so much to pack in that 8 weeks. And we really want to make sure it's worth, you know, every single person's time in that boot camp. And in order to make sure it's really worth their time, what we actually commit to is making sure that every person can launch what, you know, we call an MVP, which is a minimum viable product. And all that really means is some really basic proof of concept, that there is a market for this thing, that there's interest in this thing, and you can start, capturing that interest in some way. So for some folks, that means a full-blown website, and they're publishing reporting, you know, as soon as they leave the boot camp. Or just before they leave the boot camp. For other folks, that just means a landing page with an email, sign up, requesting for more information once the site actually launches, which, you know, even that in and of itself is a great way to measure interest. So we do everything we can through the live sessions, through the one-on-one coaching, throughout that 8 weeks, to make sure that every single person in the boot camp launches something by the end of it. And I think that's what really sets this boot camp apart from other programs that I've seen out there. This is very hands-on, and, you know, we really do ask a lot of the participants to make sure that they're set up for success once the boot camp ends.
Are there any examples that we would have heard of from last year? I know it's only a year old in terms of the cohorts that have gone through, but are there any success stories or things that may have came out of the last round that you've done?
Yeah, so in terms of Canadian participants, we did have at least 2 in our last cohort. I think we had 3 total, but we have Adam Chen with Talk Media, who was experimenting with live events and live storytelling. And then we also have a publication called Hey Repotech that was looking at reproductive health and fertility issues, and is growing and is doing really excellent work right now. And then in terms of the US participants, We have Bria, who's launched the Black Sportswoman, which looks at Black women athletes in sports across the country. And when she finished the boot camp, I think she was at something like 300 subscribers. And then she recently wrote about crossing the 1,000 subscriber mark, and 10% of those being paying members. And she actually wrote a post online about that. She got to her first 1,000 subscribers. And we've got lots of other examples too. We've got, Shasta Scout, which is another local news publication operating in a pretty conservative place. And they've broken some really significant stories that have actually gotten picked up by the LA Times. And they just got approved for their 501c3, which is the nonprofit designation in the States. So she's growing, the publication's growing. It's just really exciting to see. And, we're seeing lots of other folks from the boot camp just continuing to build on what they learned last year.
That's so awesome to hear that there's like such success already for these people. And I think especially as we see, people looking for value aligned work in a really big way right now, maybe taking, if storytelling is something you're interested in, maybe taking that chance to do something like this, to start an initiative that could help share a community's truth in a local area in the way that the startup sort of like, our startup bootcamp sort of helps you figure out. But yeah, I guess the other sort of questions I had were around like why this bootcamp is super unique, and what are the specific stuff that you sort of would teach people through the 8 weeks. Maybe we can touch on that a little bit.
Yeah.
Because I think for those of us who are not from a journalism world, the idea of stepping into the space is a little like nerve-wracking. But I do think that like the more we know from this, maybe people would be interested and take that leap.
Yeah, totally. So let me start from there, actually. So if you are someone without a journalism background or haven't been in a journalism environment before, but you're interested in this, what I would say really differentiates those applicants from other applicants that have, many years of experience in journalism or in newsrooms is that if you know your community really, really well, if you know exactly who you want to serve, what the gaps are in information that they're experiencing, and how you can deliver on those because you are of that community, and again, you understand those needs really deeply, hands down, that sets you apart from everyone else, because there is, as we talked about, this reckoning happening right now about not having as many diverse perspectives in traditional news environments. So you have a lot of people who are not of these communities, coming in and trying to like build those relationships from scratch, which is great. It's commendable. I'm glad that that's happening. But there's just something different about someone from a community, saying, I understand what's happening here, and I'm going to step in and really close this information gap and deliver this information in a way that's going to resonate with this community and feel really authentic to what they're experiencing, right? So I think if you're someone, again, who sees that gap in information in a particular community you're a part of, and you're interested in starting a publication to help with that, I think this program is great for you. And so, some of what we go through in the boot camp, and I should say it's taught by Philip Smith, who designed this boot camp from scratch during a JSK night fellowship that he had a few years ago. He's Canadian, so he and once worked at the Tyee, which is an independent news publication based in Vancouver. And he's incredible about this because he understands how to iterate and learn with every single bootcamp cohort that we do. So based on all this research he's done and all the feedback that he's gotten, some of the things that we cover are, setting clear goals. So really defining for yourself what success looks like. So one of the first things that Philip has folks do is say, okay, what do you need to make? What is your salary? What do you need to make in order to take care of yourself, your family, like your mental health, whatever? Like, write that number down. Now let's do an exercise of working backwards from that number. Let's understand how we get to that salary. And it's a really important exercise because it helps clearly articulate what success is going to look like for your publication beyond the work itself. The work is so important. We want it to be impactful, but you got to pay the bills at the end of the day, right? And so we need to make sure that this is going to be a business first and foremost. So other things, we cover in the boot camp are actually talking to your potential customers, understanding what their needs are, again, doing a little bit of that research, and then talking a little bit more about business modeling, 101 stuff. Most folks in the boot camp have no business background whatsoever. Maybe a few of them have worked in a spreadsheet before. So the business part of it is so valuable because it really does start from like a 100, 101 place, which we hear from folks over and over again is just super useful for them. And then we also talk about testing, your product, and then sales and marketing and growing your readership over time. And then there's a final pitch at the end, where folks really, can develop that skill of talking about what it is they've worked on and selling it to other people, just in terms of signing up for an email or signing up for a membership or whatever that might be. So we really try to break down the highlights of what you need to know to get started.
I love that. And I feel like it's such a cool opportunity to venture into a space. I mean, like, I'm the biggest advocate for people leaping into things now and taking a chance, because this year has been such a great learning experience. And like, we're still figuring it out as we go. But if we had, I get things similarly to the way that you're like, if you had that 10 years ago when you were working on stuff, a boot camp and mentors and people a community to sort of support you through it. How much more could you have done with that, like with that same experience? And I think as people look for those things now of opportunity and representation, and like, instead of like looking for it in our systems, maybe we just like disrupt it and create it ourselves.
Yes, exactly. That's like literally my motto, is just build it. Just build it and see what happens, it's really incredible and empowering that we have the ability to do that.
Definitely. And to participate in a boot camp like this. So I think the boot camp is like all virtual, right? Like, it's not done.
Yes.
And the applications are due on November 14th. How long do you think it takes to fill out an application is my question, because I feel like that's how people budget their time.
Oh, I totally get that. Yeah. So there are a few questions in the application. So I suggest, taking, I would say it takes about 5 minutes to read through all the questions. So it's not super long, but there are a few questions. It's not just like, check here if you want to apply, right? So there's like a little bit more involved. And we usually get over 100 applications for 24 spots, so it is somewhat competitive, although you have a great shot at getting it with those odds as well. And particularly, this is the first time we're doing this for a Canadian cohort specifically, so we do have 16 spots available for this cohort, and then fingers crossed we're able to grow it more over time. But yeah, I would say take about 5 minutes to read through the questions, and then to actually fill out the application. If you already have an idea in your mind, you should be able to fill it out in 30 minutes or less. If you take a look at the applications as sort of a structure or a guideline for how to think about what you might pitch, that's totally an option too. And so it might take you a little bit longer to fill out the application, maybe an hour, because you're working through your idea.
Right.
The other resource I would suggest is we did put together this G&I Startups Playbook last year. Actually, I think it was earlier this year. I don't even know what time it is anymore, but earlier this year. And it's a really comprehensive, like step-by-step how to launch a news publication. So even skimming through that to start getting a sense of the kinds of decisions you might have to make, or other examples of news publications that have launched and are independent media, is great to do before completing the application, because it'll give you a sense of like the language and again, just how to think about how to talk about what you want to do.
That's so exciting. I'm really pumped for the people who are going to do this, because I think it's such a great opportunity. And having chatted with you and Philip, I just know that they'll be in good hands, and that they'll learn so much, and that such greatness will come from this. And we need more of that in Canada, because Canada, as we know, is like the 21st most concentrated media in the world. And that's just like gross. So how do we fix that? And I think this is one of many, but a really important solution to that. So thank you so much for being here and like
Yeah.
explain to our community what this sort of would look like for them. We're going to share everything on our stories and help people stay informed on it. But yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for having us and for promoting this. We really appreciate it. And I'll just make this direct offer now. If anyone has any questions at all, even if it's literally just like, do I qualify for this? You can email me directly. It's
Oh,
Anika, Anika at lionpublishers.com. And you can drop that into your communications as well and to share
okay.
with your community. But this is, it's our top priority, you know, over the next couple weeks before the application deadline to make sure everyone who wants to apply in Canada can apply and has all the information they need to. So get in touch, ask questions. We're here to talk through all your ideas.
That's awesome. Thank you so much. That's a great offer. It's like being able to ask the professor questions before the class even starts. Like it's awesome.
Exactly.
um,
Well, thank
okay.
you so much. This has been
Thank you.
great.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.